I'm David Corn.
And I'm Eli Lake, sitting in for Richard Miniter, who's traveling in Turkey.
And you're watching the Corn Miniter Show, coming to you from Johnny's on the Half Show, our favorite restaurant on Capitol Hill. And Eli is a senior correspondent for the New York Daily Sun. Big political news this week, of course, is money. Loads of money. The question is, who got it, who didn't get it? Big winner of the week, at the beginning of the week, seemed to be, who?
Hillary Clinton.
And then it turned out, though, she got $26 million that she raised, and she had $10 million in her Senate fund that she passed over. And on top of that, let's move on to non-money matters in the presidential race. We didn't talk about Giuliani's figures because he got in late. No one was looking at those. But he said something very interesting the other day, at least I thought. He came out and he reaffirmed his support, not just for abortion rights, but for public funding of abortion. Now, this is really a sharp stick, poking social conservatives in the eye. Not just that he's in favor of abortion, but for public funding of this. At some point in time, is this going to, come back to haunt him? I mean, right now he's riding high. He's doing well in a lot of the polls. He's beating McCain. But can he sustain this with those sort of social stance?
Okay, here's the Giuliani formula, and this is how I think he's hoping it to work. He's going to say, listen, I'm not like Mitt Romney. I don't change my colors. You know who I am. I'm tough on the war, and I'm a social liberal. But guess what? When it comes to the justices, and he has also said this, and you got to give him credit. He says, listen, legally, I think the Constitution is dead, and I don't think that justices in general should interpret rights where there aren't any in the Constitution. We should leave these issues to legislatures. So in that respect, he's basically telling the social conservatives, we're not going to see eye to eye on a lot of issues. And you're probably going to, if I'm president, you're probably going to disagree on me when it comes to some UN funding bill, and I'm not going to eliminate, money overseas for abortions. But on the thing that you care most about, Supreme Court justices, I'm there right with you.
Well, that may work with some, but I think, if you care about abortion, and I have respect for people on the other side who do, and it's the #1 issue. If you think it's mass murder, as some of them do, I don't see how you can get behind him just because he makes a promise of nominating judges and justices of that sort. Mitt Romney.
Well, if I could just on one last point on that. Giuliani's betting on the following thing. He's saying, I know abortion's an issue. It's been a perennial issue for you for the last 30, 40, 50 years or whatever. But let me tell you something. This election, he's counting on voters to say, my #1 priority is our civilizational struggle against Islamofascism. You know I'm the best candidate on that. So who else are you going to vote for?
Listen, unlike McCain, I'm still waiting to see how strong he is, what his policy is going to be in terms of supporting what's going on there now and Bush's policies. He and Mitt Romney are playing it a little bit cute at this point in time. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
But speaking of Romney and speaking of not flip-flopping, Romney has flip-flopped on gay rights, on abortion, and gun control in favor of the conservative position.
Yes.
But the news this week that had me chuckling was that he's been going around New Hampshire telling people that he's a lifelong hunter. Republicans in New Hampshire like hunting. They like their guns.
Right, absolutely.
And guess what? His campaign had to confess, had to acknowledge that in his whole life he's hunted a grand number of 2 times. So this is just silly lying and fibbing and misrepresentation. Is this going to be? At some point, does he have an authenticity issue? Does Mitt Romney, forget the Mormonism and all that other stuff, does he have an authenticity issue?
He very well might have an authenticity issue. It's reminiscent of '04 and John Kerry's duck hunting trip in Ohio in the last week of the campaign. It reminds me a little bit of a wonderful scene from The Simpsons from several years ago, where they're showing an old debate of Nixon and Kennedy, and they're talking about their fictional beer, Duff beer. And Nixon says something along the lines of, I also have a particular affection for that beer. And Homer turns to the screen and says, that man's never had a Duff in his life. So it's a little bit like that. And I think that there is an issue where is Mitt maybe trying a little too hard to tell us exactly what we want to hear.
Well, I'm all for punishing people who tell stories about themselves when they run for office. In the pajamas poll, we see Mitt Romney at 7.2% behind Rudy Giuliani, and Ron Paul.
The nation has Ron Paul fever.
You know, well, no, a few bloggers must, and Fred Thompson at 44, John McCain at 1.4%. Maybe that's why he's not raising money. He's just too depressed about the pajamas media poll. On the Democratic side, Bill Richardson is running away with it, 45.9%, just barely ahead of Dennis Kucinich. I mean, the interesting thing about Bill Richardson this week was that President George W. Bush picked him to go to North Korea to deal with some MIA issues, actually not MIAs, but the remains of soldiers from the Korean War. And he's gone to North Korea in the past. This seemed to sort of boost Bill Richardson's foreign policy credentials, or at least remind people that he has a pretty solid background in this.
Does that really help you in a Democratic primary in this year with so much resentment and antipathy towards President Bush to be chosen by President Bush to go to North Korea?
Well, maybe you shouldn't have done it.
Yeah, maybe you should have said, I would never go to North Korea for that man.
I'm going to South Korea. I'm splitting you. You know, that's but that was, you know, listen, I think Bill Richardson is a smart, savvy guy. I don't agree with him on everything, but he is the perfect vice presidential, not just candidate, but actually the perfect vice president for a lot of these front runners. And he'll run this campaign without attacking a single one of them, so he can preserve his standing as everyone's favorite second choice. The other sort of lot of amusing items in presidential news this week. Newt Gingrich. Earlier in the week, he called Spanish the language of the ghetto. Now, he probably should have said the language of the barrio, not the ghetto, but he called it the language of the ghetto. And, you know, it was talking about his English first ideas and not having ballots in other languages. And he had to eat crow. If I spoke Spanish, I would say crow in Spanish, but I don't know what the word for Spanish word for crow is. But he did
offer a lo siento.
And did you see the video that he did?
Yes, I did.
Describe it for those who...
It's hard to explain. You really should check out the YouTube version of it, but it is the most... I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker, but it is the most stilted white man Spanish I have ever seen.
It was an apology. It was an apology.
It was like an apology from Mars, almost.
I mean, I don't speep Spanish, as I noted already, but listening to it, I got the sense that if it was someone talking English, you'd be hearing, sorry that I offended you, and I am trying to show respect by speaking in your language. Anyway, listen, I give him points for trying. I give him points for apologizing, and we can move on from this nightmare episode. Where is he in the pajamas poll? He's at a whopping 6.3%. Last item today. Your paper, the New York Sun, doesn't like any of these guys on the Republican side. It's a conservative paper, editorially speaking, and had a wonderful idea. I wholeheartedly support this. They ran an editorial saying we must draft Dick Cheney. And the reason why I like this idea is because I'm disappointed Dick Cheney's not running, because I had the bumper sticker all thought out for this. It would be Cheney in 2008, the Dick you know. But can you explain the logic behind the Draft Cheney editorial?
Or the Draft Cheney movement that we've just kicked off. Well, Dick Cheney has a lot of foreign policy
I should say you didn't write this editorial, but...
No, I mean, but it is my newspaper, and I will explain the logic on it. He's got a lot of foreign policy experience. Vice President Cheney also has a very, very clear position on the war. He's often expressed a position on the war that is very much in line with a lot of conservatives. And his wife, Lynn Cheney, would make, as the editorial says, the greatest first lady in the history of the White House. Better than Dolly Madison, better than Martha Washington, better than Eleanor Roosevelt. Lynn Cheney. And so
nothing makes me happier than the delusions of the right. Please
say what you will, it can happen.
Say what, he's at 16% in the polls now approval rating.
Hold on,
that's only because he has a big family.
Okay, if I could only say one serious thing. The editorial also makes, I think, a very keen point which is that if Cheney was in the race, you would have somebody on the campaign trail defending the president, which no one seems to be doing right now.
Well, there's a good reason why that is, because the public has turned on Bush. But as I say, the more the merrier.
The polls for Congress recently?
The more the merrier. I'd love to see Dick Cheney get in there. It's too bad his heart and common sense would probably prevent him from doing that. But anyway, that's all the time we have. Eli, it's always a pleasure. We got through most of the oysters. Thank you. And so
you want to get a picture of me? Sorry.
I don't slurp on camera. And
I do.
This has been the Corn and Miniter Show, and come back soon to see another episode of PajamasMedia.com.